All right, let's talk Alabama Crimson Tide. This is a team after week one that was left for dead, right? Kaylen DeBoer is gone. He can't do it. This team is just collapsing. Suddenly, they're one of the best teams in college football. Who saw this coming? I tell you what, Kaylen DeBoer and his staff, they've done a great job, and they're not done. They're making more massive moves as we get ready for a big-time matchup this weekend. We'll get into all that reporting in just a second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Drew, and this is Sunday Morning Inspection. All right, of course, as we work our way deeper into the season, it's becoming more and more evident that this Alabama squad, it seems to be a team on a mission, guys that have really come together, a group of guys that after a really tough week one, they kind of found themselves. Ty Simpson has emerged. Kaylen DeBoer has steadied the ship, and they're setting themselves up for a big game. Of course, LSU interim coach makes it a little interesting matchup this weekend. But lost in the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day is what Kaylen DeBoer has done this season in terms of the recruiting class, right? The big question for the Crimson Tide would be after Nick Saban was gone, what would happen to the long-term trajectory of the program? Kaylen DeBoer did some good things. It wasn't bad recruiting, but it wasn't what we were used to seeing under the Nick Saban era. But now we've got a report that highlights a major bounce back and that Alabama is very quickly returning very close to those Nick Saban level eras of recruiting, which of course is a great sign. Let's get into the article. Then we will get into the data on the other side. This report is courtesy of the Tuscaloosa News. As the start of the early signing period nears, Alabama football is doing something no other team has been able to do in the 2026 class. The Crimson Tide has more five-star commits than any other, two of which have come from inside its own state. In the past two classes, 14, Texas and Georgia in 2025 and Georgia and Alabama in 2024, reached five-star commits in a single class by signing day. The Crimson Tide landed 7 five-star players in 2023. So obviously that 5 number is a very good number at this point in the trajectory. But I think when you dive into the data, in fact, let's pull up our first chart here, you get a really good look at what we're seeing. So this is the 5 stars per year. And you can see on the far left there, 2023, Nick Saban effect still alive and well, 24, 25, DeBoer is into the fold, right? There's a lot of variability. You can see a steep decline, right? We're talking small numbers here, but when it comes to 5 stars, it matters. You go from 7 to 5 down to 3. Things aren't looking nearly as good as you would like in terms of getting that elite of the elite talent. And then so far for the 2026 class, you see that bounce back up to a good level. So we're seeing course correction. We talked about this during the offseason. Kaylen DeBoer figuring out SEC recruiting. Listen, it was a big ask for him to come down to Tuscaloosa and just know how to recruit this region, know how to recruit this landscape as good as a guy like Saban, which, I mean, I don't know if anyone will ever be as good with what he and his staff did. But to expect him to get off to a very similar start was probably asking too much. Took him a little bit of time to figure out, obviously coming from the Pacific Northwest at the University of Washington, starting to figuring out how to recruit the country in terms of the Southeast and the states and the players and the coaches and everything that makes up the deepest area of talent in the entire country by far. And he's figuring it out. And the results are speaking for it when it comes to the 5 stars he's landing. But when you take a deeper look into the stats, in fact, let's go and open up our next graphic, if you don't mind, Mize. I like looking at the percent of a class that is 5 stars because it's one of those things where just on a raw numbers basis, if you're a blue blood program, if you have a lot of available scholarships and you have a big class, you're going to get more 5 stars most likely, right? Just you're going to have more resources. So I'm going to look at how good are you at turning a percentage of your class into 5-star recruits, right? And you can see the graphic here follows a very similar trajectory. In 2023, that number was 25%, very high. Kaylen DeBoer in 2024 drops well below 20, and then 2025 it drops below 15 down to about 14%. That's no good, but again, Kaylen DeBoer figuring it out, right? The percentage of his class that is 5 stars so far in the 2026 group back up to 22, very close to that Nick Saban 25% number. So listen, is he at Saban levels? No, but like I said a second ago, that's not realistic because I don't know if anyone could ever be as good as Saban, but he's getting close. And I think this is something Kaylen DeBoer and his staff, let's give credit to his staff, organization, everyone involved with the Tide here on the recruiting front. They've done a great job in making sure they got as close as they possibly could to the greatest coach of all time. Not easy to do. I would argue downright impossible. We've seen other coaches that go to blue blood programs fail to this in short order. Obviously, you look at Coach Kelly with LSU, probably the most prominent recent example. You can find a bunch of other ones too, right? Where they come down, they try and change some things, they try and get involved in recruiting, and it just doesn't work. Alabama under Kaylen DeBoer, listen, they had that decline. Things were trending in a bad direction. We did the reporting in the offseason. DeBoer's figuring out the region. He's got his feet underneath him. And what do you know? A bounce back in recruiting. This is a great sign. Obviously, what they've done this season and what they're going to continue to do this season, we believe, is outstanding for Alabama. But I think the future looks very bright. I think a lot of the questions when it comes to Kaylen DeBoer, they're not all answered yet, but the vast majority of them are, especially right here, as the graphic indicates, when it comes to recruiting. Great job by the Alabama staff pulling off a really incredible effort right here in the recruiting game. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Alabama fans, in the comment section below, like I mentioned, and like you obviously are very well aware of, we got LSU this weekend. You guys have an interesting matchup against an LSU Tigers program that no longer has Brian Kelly at the helm, little interim coach uncertainty. I've always hated playing interim coaches, right? Because you just never know what you're going to get. You're going to get a desperate team, a team playing with house money, million trick plays, fake punts, like offense and defensive scheme changes. It's a wild environment. So it's going to be a challenge for Alabama to kind of weather that storm. Give us your prediction in the comment section below. What do you think the final score, LSU, Alabama, will be? Again, put it in the comment section below. But Miles, let me throw it over to you now. Give us your thoughts on Alabama.
Yeah, Nick, I think what DeBoer has done has been very impressive as far as the short amount of turnaround that we have seen him come in and really be able to dominate, recruiting in the SEC, which is paramount. It's really, really important. And I think the game this weekend gives me a perfect example of to talk about is exactly what we see with other SEC teams like LSU when they're able to hire a guy like Brian Kelly coming in. Kelly is a guy who came into the fold, never really had been in the SEC before, had to kind of figure stuff out. And as we've seen with LSU, really hasn't worked out too hot when you bring in a guy that isn't in the SEC, doesn't know the SEC, and it's kind of just difficult for someone to come in and really recruit and do well in that spot. Being also kind of coming around the same time DeBoer did, relatively close to it. We see just how quickly DeBoer was able to turn things around, and then how ineffective Kelly has been. So it's not something that's easy to do, especially with long tenured coaches. Kelly had been around the league or been around the college football realm for quite some time with a lot of different teams, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, or whatever the case may be. But we look now, what is LSU doing? They're going after other coaches. They're going after guys who have been in the SEC before, have been in that region of the world before. Well, we're talking about guys like Joe Brady, and also the coach down at Tulane who also coached Kentucky, coached Old Miss. So these are guys that are familiar with that landscape. So for DeBoer to come in and everyone else say, hey, we need someone who can recruit the SEC. We need someone who can do a good job. But DeBoer, they were able to grab him come in and turn around. I think it's so important because so many coaches come in to this landscape and they're not effective. They're not able to do the job. DeBoer did it, even amongst highest critics of, let's say, if you're a regular football team, you're not the University of Alabama, you're happy with any season that DeBoer has put on the table for this team, but demand perfection. This is a team has to be perennial college football playoff contender for it to be a successful season. So DeBoer to come in, really turn things around and get things on track to that, dominance level early on. I think this has been a great performance by him. We're starting to see things trend back in the right direction. We're starting to see all of the former glory of what Nick Saban brought to Alabama come back. And there's like half a year downfall, one true year of falling off, and then it's bounced back up. So a year and a half, he was able to really just learn everything in that SEC realm and turn the team around. Very impressive to me. I think he's done a fantastic job, and many more accomplished coaches than him have not been able to do that. So great job by him. Great job by this staff. And I think Alabama, because of this, is in a really great situation going forward.
Yeah, and speaking of going forward, let's zoom forward a few days to this weekend's matchup, Miles, if you don't mind. Let's pull up the predictions here, courtesy of ESPN. The first one is the matchup predictor. You can look at it and see the box on the screen, courtesy of ESPN Analytics. Got Alabama with an 80.9% chance to win, LSU 19.1. Obviously, Alabama, that's pretty good odds. Things seem to be in their favor based on the raw data, which makes sense when you look at LSU season and look how they're playing and all the question marks with their roster. Now let's go down and look at the sports books there, courtesy of ESPN Bet. The game opened up with Alabama as a 10.5 point favorite. The spread hasn't moved at all. The money line sits at minus 400, which for any of you guys who are mathematically inclined, know that means that Alabama, according to the sports books, has an 80% chance to win. And that aligns pretty much perfectly with ESPN Analytics prediction. So the analytics folks and the odds makers are in total agreement. Alabama's a pretty significant favorite, even though LSU obviously a talented group and a rivalry here in the SEC. I like Alabama's chances. I like everything they can bring to the table here. The concern I have, and I brought it up a second ago, is the interim coach issue with LSU, right? You get a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get. I think this is going to be a big game again. Kaylen DeBoer and Ty Simpson offensively get off to a fast start, right? Don't let LSU, get up 7-3, 10-3. Don't go, a quarter and a half without scoring any points or something like that. Get off to a fast start. Get the crowd going. Get all the juices going. Don't let the LSU Tigers think for a second that they actually can hang with you. And if you do that, I think you'll cruise to a massive victory. Now, if you don't do that, you let LSU make some plays, then things could get very feisty very quickly. The good news for Alabama is they've proven themselves to be a team that can overcome some of that adversity. Again, whether Vandy, South Carolina, right, Georgia, they found a way to overcome certain challenges in all of those games and really the entire season. They have been adversity overcomers for sure. So either way, I like Alabama's chances, but just for quality of heart health for you Crimson Tide fans out there, I think if Ty Simpson gets off to a fast start, this game will be over very quickly. I think LSU is going to have fight in them because they're a talented group. They're a proud bunch. But I think if you don't give them a chance to unleash that interim coach magic with any trick plays or any funky stuff, this has a big chance here to be a massive Crimson Tide SEC victory.